Alright boys, the plan today is simple. We're going to be doing the set 6 tier list for Cardfight Vanguard 0 now that we've had the format for a while and we understand more about the cards and sort of how the matchups go and what people are liking and what they're not liking. If you guys are watching this video for the first time and excited, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications so that you guys know when my videos go live for you. With that being said, let's go ahead and hop into this tier list. Alright, here we guys are in the Vanguard 0 tier list. We have about 23 different archetypes here to talk about. Some really cool ones, some really interesting ones, and some ones we've talked about at length before, but I think this one's going to be a little bit different. If you guys want to try this tier list out for yourself, I'll go ahead and leave a link down below. Show me what you guys got over on Twitter. Really quickly before we move on, we have of course the different tiers. If you guys haven't watched one of these videos before, we have 4 main tiers whenever we do tier lists. We have tier 1, tier 1.5, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 is obviously tier 1. It's the best decks. They're the ones everyone's playing. They're the ones that are the most powerful. Tier 1.5, however, are sort of the fringe decks, the decks that people still love to play but aren't necessarily as powerful or as popular as the tier 1 decks, some of them even being kind of gatekeepered by the tier 1 decks actually. Tier 2 are basically any decks that aren't powerful enough or popular enough to be tier 1, but they're almost there, and with a little bit more support, I'm sure they're going to skyrocket into tier 1 at any point. And then finally we have tier 3. This is the bottom of the barrel. Sadly, these clans just haven't had support in a while, so no one's really playing them. Also, sometimes even if they do get support, it's pretty lackluster compared to everything else all the other clans get. So, makes sense, checks out. Let's go ahead and start off in alphabetical order here. We've got Angel Feathers. So to me, Angel Feathers is one of the most interesting decks, I should say, in the format right now. I'm just gonna pop it in tier 2. And the reason for this isn't necessarily because the deck is kind of bad or because people aren't playing it. It's because, like, there are just better things, you know? Like, there are better defensive decks like Battle Sisters or OTT. There are better, like, long-term longevity decks like Reiji and Pale Moon, and even Ezel to an extent, because like, or Spec Duke, because like you have a really powerful late game, so once you get there you pretty much win. I feel like whatever like good things Angel Feather has about it, other decks just do better. But it's a really consistent deck and it's really fun, and hopefully in the future when we get Metatron and now Celestials, it'll be even better. Moving on, we have Battle Sisters. Now I think Battle Sisters and OTT in general, let me actually do both of them. Tsukuyomi are tier 1.5. Now the reason for this is because OTT is always one of those decks where, like, especially with Tsukuyomi and Battle Sisters, like cards like Silent Tom, especially in Vanguard 0, are just so powerful and people do love playing them. And even though they're not as popular as maybe they should be, or people that do play them aren't playing them enough, or there is just better things to play, these cards are still really powerful. I think a deck like Tsukuyomi is like a go-to pick for anyone in a Conquest format or like in a best 2 out of 3 tournament, because the deck is just so good at getting guaranteed wins, and it is really good at like adapting to matchups, and I really like that. And then a card like and then a deck like Battle Sisters is actually really fun and cool because it's very similar to Tsukuyomi, but it's a bit more aggressive, a bit more fast-paced, so you can kind of be more controlling / more pressuring out the gate, which is kind of nice. But whether or not one is better than the other, I think is a little too hard to say. I think it's easier to maybe say that both these decks, while they are good, aren't necessarily good enough or popular enough to be in tier 1. By the way, if I haven't made it clear already, the way that we do tier lists and the way that I sort of like evaluate how good these cards are, how good these decks are, is based on 2 things: how popular the deck is, or basically how many people are playing it on ranked or in tournaments, and then of course how powerful the deck is. What can it actually do that allows it to be so good or so popular? Alright, moving on, we have Novas. I'm gonna do all the Novas at once as well because it'll just be a lot easier for me. So the big thing here is we've got Beast Deities. Now I'm using Beast Deities here as like a way to represent all non-archetype Nova decks. So like you have Ashura Kaiser, you have Blaukluger, you have like a mixture of Beast Deities and Perfect Razor. Like that's what this represents, and sadly that is tier 3. As much of a fan as I am of like pure Beast Deities or Beast Deity Perfect Razor, it is just tier 3 because no one's playing it. These have not gotten support for almost 2 sets now. They're falling behind because limit breaks are just so powerful. Sure, a card like Beast Deity Azure Dragon is really good, and the deck that I showed off a long time ago was really good at beating MLB and beating Dope, but no one's really playing those decks anymore, so your big strength is now taken away from you, so it's not really a big selling point on the deck anymore. The next one's going to be the new one, Cosmo Lord or Death Armies, and well, they're also tier 3, and the reason for that isn't necessarily because they're not being played. sure, that's true, but also because the support they did get, as cool as it is and as interesting and intricate and different it is from Nova Grappler, it just isn't that strong compared to like cards like Perfect Razor, Ashura Kaiser, MLB, Dote, like Narukami. Like, it just does not hold up. Very sad to say that, but it's just a fact, and we all know this, and thus none of us are playing it. And the only deck to kind of break this sort of tier 3 cycle is going to be Perfect Razor, because it is still just essentially bad MLB, and bad MLB is still pretty good, and people do love playing Perfect Razor because it's a really good deck to get to. They got it nice and early during set 2. They understand it very well, and they keep playing it. So it's a very, very solid tier 2 deck. If you're very comfortable with it, it's very strong, but I don't think it actually has any place in the like top echelon of the meta. But don't worry, there are plenty of other great decks that are, I think, more viable than this. Oh, I missed Coco, by the way. So Coco is bottom of tier 2. So Coco is interesting. So I kind of talked a little bit about a Coco Cookie, like Battle Sister Soulless, like hybrid deck during my Battle Sister video, and it's really solid. I don't know how good it is though, and I also don't know if people are playing it. So for that reason alone, I can't have that thought in my head like influence my decision here. But so I have to go off of like what I know about this card, and I know people love playing Coco, and I know it's solid, and I know it's basically the same thing as Battle Sisters, just a little bit earlier and with like a worse late game. But that's still worse than Battle Sisters. So how can I put it in the same tier as it? Right? It's got to be at least tier 2. Moving on, we have probably my favorite deck to play on ladder right now. We have Dote. Sadly, Dote is going to be, whether it's Busted Dote, which is the one that I play, or a regular Dote list, with the nerf of Tejas and with sort of like the climb of other versions of this deck, like Narukami, or of, what other good retired decks are there right now? PBO Shadows. Like, this deck just keeps losing popularity, so it's in tier 1.5. I would place it higher than OTT maybe, because I think more people are playing this comparatively to these two decks, but it can go either place. While we're here, I'll go ahead and do Blockade / Good Stuff Kagero. This is just tier 3 at this point. Ever since Ezel and Gold Paladins came out, now with Lukie coming out, any kind of like advantage board style way to win the game just gets really shot out. Sure, a card like Blockade's really strong, especially with cards like Strike, and you can be super aggressive, and that's great, but the way that Good Stuff Kagero tries to win is different than the way Dote tries to win, and that's very bad because it's not really conducive to a limit break format. It's more conducive to like a grindy, like non-limit break format. Spikes is next. We have Deadly Emperor, probably my favorite multi-attack deck right now, and for that reason, along with many others, it is still tier 1. Now, I think it's going to be like the bottom of tier 1 once we get to the rest of the decks, because it's nowhere near as popular as it was when it first came out, but I do think it is still plenty powerful. Being able to use Zachary, Bracky, Jugs, Reckless as a way to get extra attacks and then kill your opponent in the late game. The second your opponent gives you Limit Break, you die. People are adapting lists to play Seafried, Skydiver, so that way they have an early game outside of Limit Break, so that way they can kind of counter the way people are playing. I love the options this deck has, as well as the overall aggressive output it has, and so for that reason and that reason alone, it's in tier 1. Moving on, we have the Gold Paladin cards, which again are going to be tier 1, both of them, Ezel, Pelennor, and Spectral Duke Dragon. This Spectral Duke Dragon, by the way, guys, is going to be representative of both Shadow Duke and of Spec Duke, because you guys know my opinion on this. I think both decks are equal in power. One is definitely better on rank than the other, and that's Shadow Duke, but Gold Duke and Shadow Duke both are good for different reasons, and for that reason alone, they're the same power, and because they're, I think, equally as popular. Obviously on ranked, I think Shadow Duke is more popular, but I think in general, Gold Duke and Shadow Duke are even in popularity. They share the tier 1 slot. But Gold Paladin and Gold Paladin Duke and Shadow Duke are like the most aggressive decks in this format. They rule the ranked format because they win games so freaking fast, and people love that, especially in a mobile game type setting. So you're just grinding with these cards, getting wins, and now that MLB is a bit slower, a bit more nerfed, I think this is like the new MLB, because they're playing 9 crits, they can restand, and they gain power, so it's really easy for them just to kind of blow up their opponent and move on to the next guy and play another game. So I think a lot of players, especially ranked players, love that, and thus they're gravitating more towards these decks, and that's why they're so popular. And of course, they have a reason to be that popular, because they are that powerful. Also, let me just clean this up. I think these two are sadly a bit better than Dudley as well, mainly for popularity, not necessarily for power. Moving on, we have Great Nature. My literal pet deck of the format. I love Great Nature. You guys know I'm a Great Nature master, but sadly, as much as I want to put this in tier 1.5, it is sadly tier 2. But it's top of tier 2 because it's very aggressive, and there are some moments where like some busted things can happen. Like you get your locks, you get your stand trigger, you pump, you attack 3 times. It's pretty fun, but it just, until we get Polaris, boys and girls, it just does not have the aggression it needs to keep up in this format. I've said it before, I'll say it again, the strongest decks in the Limit Break format are the ones that are both aggressive and consistently aggressive. And until Leopold or Great Nature gets a guaranteed way to add to their aggression, they're not going to be able to hold a candle to these other decks. Oh boy, the heartbreak of the format. You know what, let's get all the tier 3s out the way. We got D-Police, Bermuda Triangle, and we've got Grand Blue. All these boys and girls are tier 3. Don't worry guys, their time is coming. Maybe not Grand Blues, but Bermuda and D-Police, they're on their way. They're on the ruse. Look out for them. Okay, so we're down to like the last 7 here, and we got some pretty big decks that we should talk about. I'm gonna save MLB until like the very end because I have a lot to say about him. But let's go ahead and go and do Narukami. So we've got Indra and then we've got Vermilion. So already they're 2.5 and tier 1. And the pure reason for this is popularity based. So if you play Narukami, you're playing good stuff Narukami. You're playing Vermilion, you're playing Dungaree, you're good to go. But if you're a mad lad and you want to have some fun, you want to play a deck that has a really interesting early and late game kind of combination, you play Indra. Personally, I do like good stuff Narukami a bit better. I think it's a bit more aggressively consistent, and I think it has a much more tight/neat game plan, but Indra has a crazy game plan, which if you pull it off, it's pretty cool. So if you guys don't know, Indra can gain crits in the early game. You use him to push your opponent to 5 damage, and then late game you ride Vermilion. When they're at 5 damage, counterblast 2, get rid of their board, attack them 3 times. If they don't have 3 BGs, they're dead. Really cool, really fast, really simple. I like it, but to people who need to like run a hybrid style deck, they just don't like that. People like consistency, people like simplicity, so they're gonna stick with the good stuff Naru list. Plus, no one's really crafting Naru stuff right now because they're all saving their stuff for Eradicators. So if you don't have Indras, you're not going to use the Indra deck. So that's another big thing holding it back, is that no one really wants to craft Indra because they don't think they're going to get any value of it long term, and they're probably right. So that alone is what's keeping Indra sort of not popular enough to be tier 1, but it's like that close. I would actually, oh gosh, am I really going to put Indra higher than Dote? No, I'm not. Just for respect of Dote, I'm not going to do that. But I will put Narukami at the top of tier 1 because I've said before, and I'll say it again, Narukami is the ultimate check of the format. If you want to know if your deck is good, figure out if you can beat Narukami. And some of these decks in the tier 1.5 category actually can't even beat Narukami. Like Battle Sisters and OTG have a terrible Narukami matchup, but they're really good against the other decks, which is why it kind of balances out. But a deck like Great Nature, Novas, Bermuda, Champ Steel, like all these decks just get instantly checked and destroyed by Narukami because they just cannot keep up with the aggression and they just can't handle it when they give them limit break. So it's just insane. So yeah, Narukami is definitely top of tier 1 for me because I think it's just like the ultimate like decider of the format, and I fight it so freaking much. All right, guys, up next we have probably the most hyped deck from set 6. We have Pale Moon, aka Silverthorn Dragon Tamer, Lukier.deck, and this is tier 1.5, if not by sheer popularity alone. Okay, so not only is it kind of like a Diet Gold Paladin deck in that it can always fill its board, it has a guaranteed resource in Soul that cannot be messed with by your opponent that adds to its consistency, and it has 2 really cool builds. A defensive build that plays Jimmy Fortress and tries to abuse the mechanics of having your Soul being untouched, and then you have a really cool offensive consistency build with CBT, Manticore, and maybe Stand Triggers / Alice and multi-attacks, which is really, really solid. Both those work really well. All this combined with the fact that you have the beautiful Lukier waifu as your cover card means people are going to play this deck. However, like I said, it's basically a bad Gold Paladin. So it does everything Gold Paladin does, but it also has all the same weaknesses and none of the fixes. So it can't really deal with having 2 front row rear guards that are intercepts unless you get a stand trigger. And it's kind of awkward sometimes if your opponent's at 5 damage to kind of like kill them in that scenario, because you can only really get 1 attack against them every single turn, unless you play cards like Fire Juggler, Stand Triggers, or Sword Dancer Sarah. So all this kind of leads to the deck being a little bit awkward sometimes, and I think the really competitive players don't want awkward, they want consistent, so they're not really gravitating towards this deck, but it is still really strong. It makes Pale Moon a player in the format for a very long time, and I think it has a lot of potential, just lacking some of the power that it might need. In fact, I kind of want to put it above Indra. Yeah, I'm definitely putting it above Indra, by the way. Again, I'll save MLB for last. Let's talk about Cecilia. So, as you guys know, the Neo Nectar event is out. Cecilia is a deck that you can create, as well as Arboros. For the sake of this Cecilia image here is representing the entirety of Neo Nectar, but I think Musketeers / Arboros are going to be the two best archetypes, and I think they're actually going to be tier 1.5, which is kind of surprising for some people, I'm sure, because as I'm sure you guys are aware of, Neo Nectar, these cards came out, I think, at the beginning of set 7 format in JP, I think, so they had to deal with Aquaforce, Great Nature, Metatron, D-Police, you know, all this crazy stuff, and Cecilia just like couldn't keep up. It was very underwhelming compared to all these other things, but in set 6 format, I think it actually is very, very good, because you have deck thinning, you have consistency of intercepts, you have a really cool mechanic of Musketeers constantly recycling your intercepts every single turn and having resources back into your deck. You can create new cards like new Cecilias. You can have Arboros that can gain power and have a really powerful early game. I think Cecilia and Musketeers and Neo Nectar in general with this new event actually has a lot of potential in terms of their power and consistency within the set 6 format, and it's Cecilia, so everyone's going to be playing it. So I really think that given how easy it is to build this deck, the powerful cards it gains, as well as the interesting timing thing that happened, because now we're getting it a little bit earlier than JP did, will kind of lead to this deck being a lot more viable, both on ranked and potentially in tournaments. Next up, we have PBO Shadows. So this is basically like Spectral Duke Shadows, but without Spectral Duke. It's just worse, so it's in tier 1.5, but it's still Shadows, it's still really consistent, it's still the toolbox / the shed of the format. I think it's really, really cool and really strong. I don't think it's better than Shadow Duke. In fact, I don't think you should ever touch this deck without playing Dukes in it until we get Chrome Jailers, so for now, just understand that if you do play PBO Pure, you're playing a worse version of Shadow Duke. Next up, we have Reiji, which is a deck that I personally am in love with. I wish I could play it, but my pulls, as you guys already know, as I'm sure you guys know, were absolute garbage, so I could not build this deck, but I do have a lot to say about this deck. I think the best way to play it is like a turbo style, like 15 cards in soul as fast as possible build. That way you can have your maximum aggression while also having your maximum consistency. I don't think the Witching Hour cards are good. I think they're a crutch, but they do work and they do add to a different strategy, which is like a more beatdown style Dark Regulars deck, but I don't think it has the resources to actually maintain that kind of style, so I think a deck like Reiji, Turbo is a lot better, but still, regardless of that, I think Reiji, just as strong as the card is, and as so many like control-y things it has against limit break decks, like you can keep your opponent at 3 the entire game basically, and it's really, really cool. I think sadly that the deck still isn't popular enough to warrant being anything higher than tier 2. It has a lot of pressure, a lot of interesting consistency cards. In the hands of a really good pilot, it can beat anything. But the people that play Vanguard 0 aren't always really good pilots. Anyone that plays this deck on the ladder will know that there are moments when you don't even ride Reiji, where you do literally nothing. There are times when like it takes you like 5 turns to get to 15 soul, and then your opponent just kills you because you just didn't have time to pressure them enough. You know, like there's some awkward things that happen. If you don't draw your Gwyn the Rippers, you can't really beat 2 intercepts and a PG, you know, so it's going to be very awkward, I think, for this deck. Until we get more support. Okay, let's talk about the big question. What does Steven think of MLB in this format? Well, you guys kind of know my thoughts based on the best decks video that I did a few weeks ago, talking about the MLB nerf and how I thought that the MLB nerf didn't actually make the deck any less powerful, and I still stand by that. I think the deck is still tier 1 S tier powerful. I think it has all the tools it needs / had before to be strong. But something interesting has been happening in set 6 Vanguard 0, which I'm very shocked by, which is people are choosing to play the newer stuff. People are playing Reiji, people are playing Indra, people are playing Bowser, people are playing Pale Moon, people are even playing Grand Blue every now and then on ladder from what I've seen, and they're not playing MLB. I've always said that the purpose of the MLB nerf wasn't to make MLB unplayable, it was to make MLB less appealing to players so they would want to play the newer things. They would want to play decks that were more solved, more figure out, less awkward, you know, and that's why the nerf happened, and I think it's accomplished that job. I think people would rather play Gold Paladins, Dudley Emperor, Spec Duke, Narukami, all of these other decks besides MLB. Even though MLB is just as powerful, people would rather play the other decks, and I think for that reason, I have to lower its popularity by at least half as to what it used to be. You're like, I never play MLB on the ladder anymore, but I promise you when I do, I respect it and I give it the, you know, my all, because you kind of need to give it your all in order to beat it. But the question becomes, the question isn't do I think MLB is good. The question is, do I think MLB is tier 1? And I think given the nerf and how it affected the masses and how it basically affected the way we think about the deck, I think it makes the top deck of tier 1.5. It is no longer tier 1. There we go. It is no longer tier 1. And I know people are going to disagree with me on this because I've said before, it's just as powerful. There is no reason not to play MLB on the ladder right now. It is still just as good, just as powerful, and whatever. But this is not about my opinion about what these decks do. This is about what I've seen and what I think the popularity of it is from you people. So I don't think you guys are playing MLB that much anymore. Do I really know why? No, but my assumption is because the nerf is sort of de-incentivizing you to want to use it and want to build it and want to make it work. So you're not going to do it. You're going to play more solved things like Narukami, Spectre Duke, Ezel, etc. And in all fairness to the deck, by the way, as well, I think there are better decks for ranked as well. There's Spectral Duke Shadows. That's the best ranked deck right now. I think for the sakes of this video and for the sake of like how I'm judging these cards and these decks, MLB is a tier 1.5 deck. Like it just is. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, but I think that's the way it works. Hopefully the Twitch chat agrees with me and they don't yell at me all day. But yeah, that's the tier list for set 6, boys and girls. Let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if I got anything wrong. Let me know if you want me to try and change anything, or if I'm just like way out of line here as to what's good and what's not. But this is what it's looking like. I think set 6 brought about a lot more diversity than people thought. I think people didn't realize how much people wanted to play Lugia, Battle Sisters, and Reiji, but they are, and it's pretty crazy. And because of that, I think it's leading to a really cool format. Like, I'm hearing more and more people say that this current meta for Vanguard, you know, Limit Break meta, is like one of their favorites for Vanguard 0 because they're super diverse and they're like playing risky things. They're trying out decks that they've never played before, like Indra, or they're still playing Battle Sisters, or they're playing Angels on ladder now just for the heck of it because they want to have fun and they know that they can and still win, which I think is a really cool thing, and the game's heading in a really cool direction, and I think it'll continue to head that way even into set 7. But of course, Aqua Force is a thing. But don't worry, we'll talk about Aqua Force next time. It'll be exciting. But anyways, guys, that'll go ahead and do it for today's video. Hope you guys did enjoy. If you guys do have any questions, leave them down in the comments below, or better yet, hop into my Twitch channel. I go live every Monday, Thursday, Friday. I do all kinds of things in just chatting, and I play a lot of Vanguard 0. In fact, we're here right now making this tier list. Say hi to YouTube chat. We were just doing a whole bunch of stuff. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. If you guys did, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications. And as always, I've been your true champion, Steven. Please be sure to work hard, rest easy, and live well, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.